Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl podcast, which is all about motivating and inspiring you. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. The Tough Girl podcast is sponsorship and ad-free, and that's thanks to the monthly financial support of patrons. To find out more about supporting the Tough Girl podcast, please do go and visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast. You can sign up from $2 or $5 every single month. All patrons will get their name on a dedicated patrons page on the Tough Girl website, and all female patrons $5 and above are invited to join the closed Facebook group, the Tough Girl Tribe. Today, I'm delighted we're going to be speaking with Karen Darke. She's a British Paralympic cyclist, para-triathlete, adventurer, and author.
I've decided to call myself a kind of alchemist because I've definitely spent most of my life working with or pursuing gold, whether that was working as a geologist studying gold in the Bolivian Andes or later chasing gold medals. And out of the medal that I won, the gold medal that I won in Rio, has evolved a project called Quest 79, which we'll get onto. But it's all about kind of encouraging people to step out of their comfort zone and find their inner gold. And I hadn't really realised that all these things connected up, and my whole life had seemed to be about gold. But I'm also really interested in, as well as the outside adventures, inner journeys and inner transformation. So I guess the combination alchemist seems to fit well, whatever that means.
I love it. It's absolutely fascinating, being on your website and seeing what you've done. But I'd love to start with Quest 79, because 79, the number is very significant for you. And I'd love for you just to share a little bit more about the significance and the quest and how it came about.
Well, the story starts with a really ridiculous story about me in the summer leading up to the Rio Paralympic Games, where I developed an addiction to a chai latte drink from a common cafe chain. And I was going to the same cafe every day and was always like, can you make it extra hot as you can make it? And they're like, just ask for it at 79 degrees because that's the hottest our machine makes it. So then this led into a kind of joke amongst my friends and the team, because they were all kind of, what a diva, asking for your drinks at 79 degrees. And then I won the gold medal in Rio and realised afterwards that it was the 79th medal for Britain. And then this number 79 just seemed to keep coming into my life in all sorts of bizarre ways. Like, the only place I wanted to go after the Paralympics was to the Outer Hebrides, and a friend sent me a picture of an article about a ferry that had run aground in the Outer Hebrides and 79 passengers were stranded, and it's just kind of little things like that. Anyway, so that led me to, as a climber, climbers regularly do, not regularly, but, some people decide to climb the 7 summits, one the highest on each continent. And I suppose I'm a climber and a cyclist, or ex-climber and a cyclist, and I'd always wanted to sort of cycle around the world, but don't want to sign out of my life for 5 years or however long it would take on a handbike. So somehow I came up with this idea of a project called Quest 79, where I would cycle 7 continents and 9 rides. So 7 continents and 2 Paralympic Games. And the rides are all connected to coastlines, water, coastlines, rivers, things related to water. And then at the same time, I wanted to encourage other people just to step out of their comfort zone and be a little bit brave and do something they might not normally do or dare to do, like a dream that they'd always maybe thought about, but then just thought, I can't do that. And I suppose that's from my own experience of realising how much we can learn and grow and discover about ourselves when we do kind of extend our zones a little bit. So yeah, that's in a nutshell Quest 79.
Oh, I love it. And I love the synchronicities with things like that, the temperature of the water, the 79th medal. Take us back to Rio and winning your gold medal.
Yeah, I don't know what to say really. I suppose I never had confidence as a rider. I never ever won a race. In fact, when I began training with that idea of trying to get to the London Paralympic Games, I only ever came last in all the races I did, as in the organisers were packing up and going home. I was that badly last, or I was being lapped by competitors. So, the idea of A, getting to Paralympic Games, and then B, ever winning a gold medal just seemed crazy, really. But it's been quite a journey, and it's a journey that's taught me so much about, I'm not born with natural talent to go and win, and it's pretty much the only race I've ever won, really. I think I've maybe won one other small race once. But I've realised that when we just commit to something and we almost make it so real that it's kind of almost happened before it's happened, and we just commit and keep trying and just put in that the hours and the belief and keep the dream going, then surprising things do happen. So yeah, it was a long, good, amazing journey.
Was there a point where something changed for you, sort of, mentally, especially, and you're saying, always sort of coming last and not thinking you were going to get picked, and the first race that you've ever run, or not run, won, then pulling it out of the bag, like when it actually counted, like was there something significant that you could latch onto?
I suppose there's been a couple of defining moments in my racing career, and one was actually winning a medal in the London Paralympics, because it really was only this dream of getting there. And I really surprised myself with my performance there, not just with the silver medal that I won in time trial, but also me and my teammate found ourselves racing for the bronze medal and decided to try and share it, and held hands. And long story, but that's not allowed in Olympic Games. So she actually got the medal, but that was all good. But what was defining about that games was, it was like, oh my goodness, I'd never even thought about doing this again. Like it was just, could I get to a games in my own country? And then to win a medal, and then realise that there were, UK sports lottery grants available that could support me to go and try and have this journey with riding my bike as a career. And it's funny because I look back when I was a kid, and my dad was really into cycling, and my brother as well. And I remember family holidays to the Alps, and once watching the women's Tour de France in the Alps and thinking or saying, I'd love to do that one day. And then, of course, that was never really looking like I never pursued that reality. And then I broke my back, and you'd never think that all those years later, I would actually find myself becoming a kind of professional cyclist. So that was a surprising moment, and then defined the next 8 or more years of my life, ever since 2012, really. And then I will always remember a race. I think it was I can't remember what year it was in, actually. It probably was in 2012, when I always mentally put myself on the back foot, like I was always the weaker rider. And when we got to a race, I'd always have some of the other women on pedestals, thinking I need to get on their wheel and follow them. And so much so that you're lining up for the start line, and you'd be following them so you could be in position behind them off the start line. And this one race, I suddenly thought, what am I doing? Like, if I'm doing that, I'm mentally already putting myself on a back foot and telling myself that they're better and faster than I am. And I had this, it sounds like quite subtle, but it was a really defining moment when I stopped following and just pulled up on the start line next to one of I think she was the world champion at the time. And mentally in my head went, I'm an equal, I'm not trying to stay with her. Do you get what I mean? And it really sort of shifted something, and that changed things as well. And I suppose the next moment, wasn't really a moment, but just a dawning realization, was that when I saw the race course for Rio, it was flat, it was by the ocean, and I tend to go best on fairly, flat courses that are fast. You build up your speed and then you keep that speed going. My physiology and my body just seemed to work better for that kind of race, and just suddenly had this little seed of actually, if you're ever going to win a race, that is the one. And so that built from there, and I suppose I just fed that seed and nurtured that seed. And you never totally think you can, but I had a belief that if I was ever to win a race, that was it. And I believed I had a chance. And I think that's all we need to believe, is just that we have a chance.
And having that seed and nurturing it and watering it, and doing all the training and putting all the hours and everything else that's needed to win a gold medal. Were you getting sort of mental training and support from a sports psychologist to help you really sort of hone and help you with your confidence and your belief about winning?
Well, I had one session with a sports psychologist before the London Paralympic Games, and then a series of sessions with another one before the London Paralympic Games, and they were really helpful. And the best thing that came out of those was just being asked the question, who are you? Which, that kind of Zen Buddhist eternal question, who am I? But actually it really helped, because it made me go, well, I actually do take a few risks, and what is there to lose? And I could just pull up alongside someone on the start line and go for it and see what happens. And yeah, that was quite helpful. But since then, from London to Rio, I've trained myself in hypnotherapy and sports psychology. So I've ended up kind of being my own sports psychologist, and just played around a lot with different methods of showing up for a training session, studying what's kind of looking at what's going on in my head and playing around with different ways of thinking or where I put my focus. So I've kind of become my own sports psychologist, I suppose. And that's, pretty much since 2012 onwards, that's what I've done. And now I actually work helping other people with sports psychology. So I don't have many people, but I work with a few athletes, and I love it. I really love using all the things I've learned and all the study I've done to help others do that and change their mindset.
You've put it into practice as well with, some of the various challenges that you've done. And you've done like the wild way, the water way, the spirited way, the sacred way, the hot way, the golden way, the express way, the continental way. But I'd love to go back to the wild way. So I believe the wild way was sort of the first journey, the first adventure that you went on. Would you just share a little bit more about what it was, the distances, what was involved?
The truth is that Quest 79 got invented after the Golden Way and the Wild Way, so I was a little bit naughty. I kind of went backwards, but it felt like it all began in Rio, and I called that the Golden Way. A year before Rio, myself and a few teammates had a chat about, everyone talks about post-Olympic depression, and we're like, don't know whether we'll get that or not. I certainly never had it after the London Games, but we all decided we all had kind of hearts in the wilderness, and we thought it'd be really good to just invent a journey that's something to look forward to after Rio, so that, you don't suddenly find yourself looking at an empty hole, or, we kind of thought it'd be great to have something. And we played this party game. We stuck all these different places in the world in a kind of bowl or a hat on bits of paper, and there were like multiple copies, and then we all pulled out the one that we wanted to do the most, and we all had the same thing, and it was Patagonia. And it's a road that I'd come across a long time ago called the Carretera Austral, which is a road that runs the length of Chilean Patagonia, basically. It's largely a dirt road. I think now, actually, when we cycled it, there was quite a lot of road work going on, putting asphalt down, and now there may be more asphalt than dirt, I'm not sure, but it was very much a lot of dirt when we did it. And yeah, basically it runs down the length of Chile, and we were aiming to get to the end of the road. It just comes to a dead end north of the Torres del Paine National Park, and you can go cross country. Some people then hike and carry the bikes and get into the national park that way, but actually that was tricky for me, so we decided we'd end the journey at the end of the road. And yeah, so I did it with two teammates, one who has a visual impairment. He's lost all his peripheral vision, my friend Steve Bate, and his wife Caroline, who's a friend, and she doesn't have a physical disability, but she'd never done anything like that before. So she was like, oh, wow. She'd never taken a journey with panniers and into the wilderness camping and traveling independently by bike touring. And Jacco Van Gass had lost his arm in Afghanistan in the military. So has a carbon arm from right up at the top. So the four of us took off for, most of the month of December, really, down through Patagonian Chilean Patagonia. It was a pretty incredible trip, and despite all the best planning, the bike that I had made for it, I knew I'd need some kind of mountain bike type of thing. So I had a new fork made so it could take a big fat tire, but unfortunately it really didn't work on the dirt road. So as soon as there was a gradient of more than about 3%, my wheel span. So it became this kind of incredible feat that we even made it, because my friends, basically every time we got to a long hill, we developed this system where one of them would stop near the bottom, one in the middle and one towards the top, put their bike down, and then be ready when I came cycling past to come in and shove, so that I was pedaling and they were shoving, and that way the wheel didn't spin. But they had really heavily loaded bikes. Two of them had trailers on the back, one of them with my wheelchair on the trailer. So you can imagine trying to do all of that and balance the kit and be in the wilderness was fun and challenging, and yeah, it was a good trip.
I bet there must have been lots of funny moments throughout the trip. Were you camping and stuff when you were out there? Was it quite easy getting like resupply and food and everything else? Like, how remote was it?
There's little villages along the way, but you definitely don't find anything every day. So we'd figure out how many days of supplies we would need. So it'd be like, okay, it's 4 days to the next village or 5 days to the next village, and then just carry enough food for that time. And yeah, stream water and iodine or something to sterilize the stream water. And surprisingly, because you are in the wilderness and it's beautiful, but it was actually really difficult to wild camp with me and the team, because unlike Scotland, for example, where we have the right to roam and not everything is fenced off, a lot of the land in Patagonia is fenced off and gated, and its own, then it's in theory not okay to go there and camp. So there were these beautiful green kind of meadows at the roadside, but there'd be this really high fence between you and it. So we did have a few interesting moments when we're like, we really have to camp on that. That's just too good. And I'm sure no one would mind, but my teammates got good at posting me through gates and things so that we could actually camp. And some nights we were just camping in the gravel, literally at the side of the road in a ditch, kind of what we figured was kind of safe, like enough off the road that we weren't going to get run over, but really just a gravel ditch. And then other times in the villages, it was quite easy to find not really campsites as such, but quite a few private houses just advertise or are open to tourists camping in their garden and maybe have access to a toilet or a water supply. So we did that quite a lot as well. Surprisingly expensive, actually. We were surprised how expensive camping was when we did stay places like that. But yeah, we just kind of juggled it and made it up as we went along.
What were the Himalayas like for you?
I love the Himalayas because when you go at the right time of year, it's unlikely you're going to get wet. There's no creepy crawlies. I love the fact that it's dry and sunny and the fresh thin air. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I come alive out there. I love it. And even though you'd think the Himalayas would be really difficult to cycle in, many of the roads there have got quite gradual gradients because if there is any traffic, it might be carrying goods from one place to another, and the gradients aren't that steep because trucks wouldn't get up otherwise. So yeah, I love it whenever I've been. I think I've been about 4 times now to different areas of the Himalayas. And the first one was cycling from Central Asia across the very western end of the Himalayas, the Karakoram, from Kyrgyzstan to Kazakhstan into Western China and then across into Pakistan and the Hindu Kush mountains. Went back another time into northern India, up into Ladakh and that area. That was pretty hilly actually and very poor road quality. So that was really challenging. Steep gradients and really, really rough roads. And then the Tibetan Plateau from Lhasa to Kathmandu, which is just incredible. One of my favourite journeys ever, I think. And just in 2018 as part of the Sacred Way, following the River Ganges from the Himalayas downstream. So yeah, I seem to have a soft spot for the Himalayas.
Yeah. Doing the Sacred Way, I mean, with some of the descents, like how scary are the descents and how quickly are you going like downhill? Because I look at some of the hills, I'm like, oh my God, I feel as though I'm freaking out a little bit.
They're not that steep. I mean, the longest descent I've ever done, which is incredible, is when you come down off the Tibetan Plateau down to Kathmandu, and I think it might be one of the longest descents in the world. It's basically just sort of about 4,000 meters just dropping off. It obviously takes you a good few days to do that. I can't remember how many days we took doing that descent, maybe 4 days, or I can't really remember. But it's nothing that steep because, again, traffic will travel up there. So I've never found it terrifying, just stunning. And you just got to keep your eye on the corners a little bit and maybe stop periodically to let your brakes cool down. But yeah, no, stunning. And from the Ganges, it drops fairly gradually, actually. It wasn't anything radical. You lose the altitude over a few days, and then the river doesn't drop off any giant waterfalls, so you're just dropping gradually and all the way downstream. I convinced my friends that came with me that it was going to be the easiest of the ride because it went from source to the downstream, so it would all be downhill, but that's definitely not true because clearly the road doesn't always follow the river when you're in big mountain ranges. So actually we soon discovered there were plenty of big climbs as well.
On the journeys and the quests that you've been on, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've needed to face and overcome?
So I don't, like some people, I think they just think I must have a team and giant budgets, and it's not true. So I'm organized, but I don't like to over organize, and I don't like to have every detail mapped out. I like to go with the flow and trust the process and see what happens and see who you meet and just see what evolves. So you obviously never know what's going to happen with that, but also the people I've traveled with have kind of come that way. So there's a few journeys I've taken which have been with really close friends, and then more that have been with people that I really don't know very well. I've maybe, I know them a little bit, or they're a friend of a friend, but suddenly when you go from having met someone half a dozen or less times in a group, a cafe or a little ride or something, to being intensely with them for a month or two, that's a different sort of thing. So yeah, like some of my journeys have been but you're completely codependent on each other, and you're really together. So you're a team, but you're all going through different challenges. So what's been really amazing and I've loved, but also quite challenging, is that my teammates on each trip have mainly been people who've never done things like this before. So they maybe lack confidence. They've never done anything like this. So the journey through the expressway, as I called it, through from Canada to Mexico down the coast of the Pacific coast, that was with two people who I really didn't know that well. And one of them was trying to lose 45 kilos from committing to doing the trip to the end of the trip. And the other, it turned out that he had quite a big alcohol problem, and I didn't know that. And the father of the other one had been an alcoholic, or maybe not his father, but a family member. So there was kind of you can imagine there was a dynamic. And it was good in lots of ways, because you just you've got a common goal, and so that keeps you together. But also, when each person is going through their challenging journey, then it means that they're not always available for the team, if that makes sense. Yeah, that's sometimes been challenging. The trip through Australia was with a friend who had also never done anything like that before. I don't think he'd ever cycle toured or camped. So it was all really new and exciting. I didn't realise it was waiting on double carpal tunnel surgery, that he'd had double knee replacements, that he was really, really, really saddle sore. So sometimes it's just really hard seeing the people you're with go through their hardship, if that makes sense. And even though I'm on the surface, and probably am the most vulnerable, because I'm so dependent on my wheelchair and them, and potentially could have all sorts of problems, from skin damage to bladder infections to all sorts of things. It's also made me realise that I have got years of experience of doing these sorts of things, and maybe I'm just a little bit mad too. I don't know, but it's just been really interesting and fun, and at times challenging, to journey with people that I don't know that well, and that of going through their own sort of challenging journey, if that makes sense.
I always think back to one of the hardest things I ever did was something called Marathon des Sables, where you run 6 marathons,
Yeah,
6 days.
yeah.
And for me, because it was such a big physical and mental challenge for me, I could only focus on myself. And I knew, so I wasn't sort of part of a team, but I was in a tent. And I knew that there were other people who were really, really struggling. But I just didn't have the capacity to take on their emotional needs. And you've almost got a little bit brutal, thinking, if I even give you 5 or 10%, then I don't think I'll be able to get through the race, because I'm not, I'm having to give it everything to get to the end. So I definitely get that. But it hasn't stopped you going on these adventures and challenges with new people, and you've got an incredible adventure that you're planning. So I think it's for 2022, the pole. I'd love you to share a little bit more about this dream, the pole of possibility.
Yeah, so again, this has kind of come about in some synchronous, interesting ways. And that's happened right along with the project. So it makes you feel like you're doing what you're meant to do with your life somehow. For example, we had a launch event at the theatre in Inverness for Quest 79, and to try and encourage people to take on their own challenge. And after it was all arranged and ready, someone said, well, you obviously did that deliberately on that day. I was like, what do you mean? It's the 7th of the 9th, the 7th of September. And I was going, no, I didn't. That's just weird. That's a coincidence. And the same with this idea for Antarctica. So I've always kind of struggled with how, I don't just want to go to Antarctica and go to the South Pole and pay masses of money. And it just feels like it's not what I'm really about. And it's also not what this project is about. And then it's like you also kind of feel like you need a purpose. So I was really stuck with it. I just couldn't work out where to go, quite what to do, how to make it all stack up with my values and costs. And we're raising money, 79,000 for a charity as well. So I was just kind of never really getting to grips with it. And then I came across the fact that 79 degrees longitude, I'm getting muddled up now, is in Antarctica. Anyway, basically 79 degrees latitude and longitude is in Antarctica, and it's a very doable distance. It's actually going to be about 79 miles, nautical miles. So we've switched to nautical miles instead of kilometres, but it's from the adventure base that people fly into, in one of the main adventure bases that people fly into in Antarctica. So that when I found that out, that was just, again, wow, that is really weird. And many years ago, I had this idea of creating something called the Pole of Possibility. And then that was long before I knew anything about 79 and this whole project. So now it feels like the project is all about encouraging people to discover what's possible for themselves. You know, we can really limit ourselves with our beliefs, with the baggage that we accumulate through life, with our lack of self-belief, like all the things that we carry and hold, or just simply the way we've been brought up and the mindsets that we often have. And I just really believe through my own experiences that anything is possible, and really surprising things are possible if we can just dare to begin, basically. And so, yeah, we're going to create the Pole of Possibility at 7979. And we're partnered with a Scottish organisation called the Polar Academy, where there's a fantastic young woman, Iona Somerville, who's 19. When she went on a Polar Academy journey when she signed up when she was 14, I think, took it when she was 15 to Greenland, which was like a kind of Arctic expedition type of thing. And that really changed her life. And she's gone on to really impact thousands of young people in Scotland through her story and telling others who have then joined the Polar Academy and gone on and changed their lives. And it's just this wonderful kind of snowball effect, or ripple effect, whatever you want to call it. So Iona is going to be part of our team. So there's some parallels, although obviously very different, between her story and my story. And what she learned from her journey with the Polar Academy has really helped her with a very traumatic event she had, being part of the Manchester bombing and the Manchester Arena bombing, the concert where the Ariana Grande concert where a bomb went off and many people were killed. So she was there in the middle of that. So yeah, we've got my brother's coming with me, and a filmmaker, and an Arctic guide experienced person who's got tons of passion and enthusiasm for the project. So very exciting. And we're planning kind of an education project around it, and hopefully definitely a film, and hopefully a BBC podcast, all sorts of things that we're working on.
Have you spent much time in the cold? Are you good in cold environments?
I'm terrible. I'm paralyzed from the chest down, which means below the chest, your blood vessels don't constrict or dilate, so you get really cold really easily. So I can be in a pretty hot place when everyone else is literally wearing nothing, and I can still be really cold. I just can't, and my body doesn't thermoregulate below the chest, sorry. So it'll be interesting. But the secret is not to get cold in the first place. So I have skied across the Greenland ice cap, and I did survive that, and it was -30, and that's given me the confidence that if I can do that, we can do this.
How would you go about sort of regulating your body?
I only sweat above my injury, which is kind of in the middle of my chest. So obviously the top half of my body, at least, I just regulate like anybody would. You get hot, you get your layers right, etc. But below there, I've discovered over the years that the secret really is not to, in terms of cold, is just don't let it get really cold in the first place. So in Greenland, I was really worried about that. It's like I'm just so vulnerable for catching hypothermia or cold injuries, and just wore so many clothes down there the whole time that nothing had chance. So I just used like my upper body to help regulate me and kept my lower body really cozy, and that seemed to work. So yeah.
That's going to be an amazing challenge. And one of the other sort of synchronicities as such, which I was reading on your website, that 79 is the atomic number of gold.
It is, yeah. I should have known that as well, because I was a geologist studying gold for years, but I'd actually forgotten until someone pointed it out to me.
But one of the things that you talk about is about inner gold and this possibility for personal change and resilience and strength and golden confidence-giving qualities that we all have inside of us. And I'd love for you just to maybe share more about, because you know, especially at the very beginning, you talked about sort of the outside explorer, but also the inner journey. I'd love for you to share more about the inner gold, the inner person, the inner journey.
I suppose I've always seen life as a bit of a learning journey. I think sometimes people I don't know how people perceive me, but I suppose when you're just constantly out doing adventures, maybe they think you're just some kind of adrenaline junkie, but that's never really been what it's been about for me. And similarly with racing, like I really have not that much interest in racing. Who really cares who rides a strange looking bike the fastest in the world? And for me, it's always about the journey and what I'm learning. And sort of alongside the adventures, I've always had an interest in health and well-being and healing, and studied various things from Chinese medicine and acupuncture and hypnotherapy to reflexology and all kinds of different healing methods. And I suppose I've just ended up getting to a place where I realize that, we are our best in the world when we're peaceful inside. And when we're peaceful inside, the world around us is also more enjoyable and beautiful and peaceful and all of that. So I kind of just think there's a reflection of the inner and the outer worlds that goes on for each of us. And so, yeah, so when we can find ways to connect with those emotions that enable us to feel happier and more appreciative of what we've got and grateful and joyful, all those kind of things, it's easy to say, it's easy to try and force those things, but actually, I do kind of believe that our journey through life is about finding ways to experience those things without forcing them, and they start to come more naturally. And each of the rides I've taken on each of the continents has really taught me something about that. So it's almost like each of them has given me a gift, one of these kind of inner qualities. So yeah, so for example, America, the Pacific ride really got me into contemplating about freedom and how, I was with these friends who were struggling with different addictions, and I'd questioned how much I'd been addicted to just pedaling and pursuing this gold medal. And I clearly love to ride my bike, but you have to sometimes ask, at what point does it become unhealthy when you do too much of anything, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing? So, it got me really thinking about freedom, and the journey through down the Ganges was very much about love, like the love that we received from the Indian people. And the two friends I did that with actually ended up being engaged at the very beginning of the trip and kind of married on the Ganges. It was just all sorts of elements to it which were about that. And each trip has basically given me something. The ride through Australia and the river there, you're riding through this desert following a river and realize that these crops are being grown which are really water hungry, and water's basically completely scarce. You're in a desert, and yet it was a struggle to find any water, and you start to really appreciate little things. And it left me with this really strong sense of gratitude at the end of it, like overpowering almost, very powerful feelings of gratitude. So yeah, each journey's given me one of these kind of qualities, and I suppose I've realized that those are the qualities that if we can bring more of them into our lives, then we're generally going to be more peaceful and calm and happy, and that's when life feels better generally, when we're not struggling to fighting things all the time.
Yeah. When you are struggling, when times are tough, or you've just had a rubbish day, or things haven't gone to plan, or the finances haven't come through, or you've lost the sponsorship, how do you make yourself feel happier? How can you feel happiness and gratitude and joy and feel the positive emotion?
When difficult stuff happens, I just ask myself questions. Obviously, it's not always. Sometimes you've got to feel the emotions. Like, we think that we're always supposed to be happy, but maybe the whole Chinese medicine approach would be yin and yang. You can't have one thing without the other. Everything's got its opposite in the world, from light and dark, happy and sad, etc. So I think having a mixture of all emotions is okay. So some of it is just about being okay with feeling what you're feeling and not judging it as being a bad thing. I think we're kind of taught, well, I certainly used to think that feeling angry was a bad thing, or being angry was a bad thing. And I'm like, well, as long as you're not causing anyone else any damage, if you notice that feeling inside yourself, there's nothing wrong with it. It's okay. And then somehow it doesn't have any power over you then. As soon as you just accept it, it doesn't have any power to control you. And I often just think tomorrow's another day, and probably just like it can pour with rain one day and then be gorgeous the next day, that's often how life is. So I kind of think that it's only when we get really attached to the bad stuff, or start to analyze it or judge it or feel that we shouldn't have it, that actually it can stay with us longer. Whereas if you just go, oh, right, okay, that's today and tomorrow's another day, that's usually how I try and approach it. And I always ask myself these questions like, okay, is there anything I can learn from this? And how can this help me in the future? Or I just have a belief that whatever I'm learning will help me in the future or help other people in the future. And that means that it doesn't matter, because I'm learning something that will be useful, even if I don't know what it is at the time.
How has COVID affected you?
Well, it means that I've not been back in Scotland or the UK for a long time, because I don't know if you know that I'm in Mallorca right now. So I've been trapped in Mallorca, which really hasn't been too bad. It has been extremely strict here. So we were not allowed out at all for exercise or anything, and quite heavily policed. But actually, I found it really okay. Probably the toughest time was the first week when restrictions lifted, and I realised that I'd got into this comfort zone of just being in this little smaller world where it was much, kind of simple, and there's no choices to make because your choices are taken away. And suddenly it was like, oh, suddenly there's choices and options. And I suspect a lot of people have been feeling like that. People I've talked to, it sounds like, life is quite complex, and sometimes it creates pressure for us to make decisions and or to have to say no to people, and then any emotion that comes with that, like guilt or letting people down or pressure. And it's apart from the terrible side of it that some people are really suffering and people have been dying, which is clearly awful, for a lot of people, it's perhaps brought this strange world where things are very, very simplified, choices taken away, and in a way, there's kind of something nice in that. My hardest bit was actually that first week, and almost this sense of agoraphobia, or just this bit of, oh wow, I have to make some decisions with all these options.
Now, Karen, you have actually written 3 books, and I'd love for you just to maybe share a little bit about each of the books and where people can buy them.
The first book I ever wrote is called If You Fall. It's on Amazon, or you can get it off my website if you want signed copies. And that's really about my journey of first becoming paralyzed. I really didn't write it as a book. I wrote it as a cathartic process for myself, a kind of healing process at first. And then it was only later that it ended up somehow, someone said it'd be a great book, and that's where it went to. The second book is called Boundless, and that's a book that I wrote as a result of being part of a mountain writing program in Banff. That's a part of a Banff incredible centre in the Banff Mountains in Canada. And I was just very lucky to get this place on the writing program, and that led to this. And it's about 2 specific adventures, which are skiing across Greenland and facing fear and climbing El Capitan, which was pretty much my first time back to going climbing after becoming paralysed in a climbing accident. And then the third book is called Quest 79. That's not anywhere. I think it might be an ebook, possibly on Kindle, but really it's only in print from me. And it's kind of short stories, kind of positive psychology stories. So a short story from one of my adventures or from sport, and then a kind of so what? Why am I telling you this story? What's in it that might be useful for you? And so, yeah, those are the three books. I do believe Boundless, I have some copies left, but there's only one left with Amazon. And just during lockdown, someone messaged me and said, look how much your book is on Amazon. And they must be selling the last copy for about $1,000 or something. Makes me feel like I'm some sought after writer, but I think Amazon are just trying to make a big bucks out of their last book.
Well, so yeah, well, hopefully, if people buy them directly from you, you get more of the money, don't you? Hopefully.
Yeah, but to be honest, I have very few of those left, so I might need to do another print run. It's all things to get around to.
Absolutely, absolutely. You actually do this awesome program. It's called the Adventure Mindset Program. I'd love for you maybe just to share a little bit more about that, what it is, and how people can get involved.
So that's something that developed actually during the COVID period. Well, as I say, I've studied all these different things related to psychology and mindset, and really interested in that internal journey. And I just decided, hey, I'm going to set this up during this lockdown period. And at first, I didn't really know how many weeks I would make it, where it would go, but it became an online weekly cafe, which was taking the idea of an adventure mindset. And I suppose I see similarities between the kind of mindset you need to have when you go off on an adventure. You're going into the unknown, you're a little bit scared, you need some courage, you need to be willing to be ready for anything, the unexpected, but also you need to really look after yourself and care for yourself. And it really, to me, is a perfect metaphor for a great way to live life. So that was the idea behind it. And I just thought that during lockdown, that would be really helpful for people. And then as a result of that, it was really well received. We had a great group that we worked through that and decided I'd like to offer that going forward to other people. So I share stories of my adventures and the mindset and I suppose my journey, but in a way that is hopefully gets people thinking about their own journey. I guess it's kind of like a personal development journey that you go on with it. So, yeah, it's really for anybody who's just interested in adopting a mindset which allows them to be a little bit braver or get out of a rut and change things a little bit. Just want a bit more for yourself in life, whether that's peace or whether that's adventure, helping create that with people. So what I'm offering at the moment is a series of things, kind of pre-record things that I've made that people can work through, but also with coaching from me to support them through that journey.
And where's the best place for people to follow along with your adventures, to sign up for the Adventure Mindset program, get your books and all that jazz?
So it's all on my website, which is Darke with an E on the end.com, and the Polar Possibilities on there, the Adventure Mindset's on there, all the loads of blogs and podcasts that are all free, and just sort of sign up to receive updates when people want them. So yeah, it's all there.
Fantastic. And finally, Karen, I'd just love for you to leave our listeners with final words of wisdom, final words of advice for other women out there who want to do their own personal quest. They want to, get outside, experience more from life.
We can always make so many excuses why it's not okay, why we're not good enough, why this isn't the time. I'm kind of an expert in this, but I'm also constantly have to challenge myself. Like, we're human, we're all humans. So sometimes when I'm speaking, or doing something like this podcast, I hear about something I'm saying, and it's almost like a reminder to myself that, there's always an area of your life where you maybe just not looking at something, where you've just let it get a bit stale, and a bit of going in there and freshening it up would be really, really helpful. So, yeah.
I remember reading in one of your blogs, it's a really simple question that you ask yourself, which you found holds sort of enormous power, which is, how can I or we, make that possible? So instead of people being overwhelmed, saying, every reason why they can't do something, it's almost like, actually, hold on, how can we make that a possibility? Which I think is so, so powerful.
Yeah, I think it's easy to take that into the external world. It's about making things, possible, whether that be an adventure or a change in your life in some way. But I also do it with myself, with how I'm feeling. So, I went through a period of getting really bad migraine headaches regularly. And then you're like, it's got to be more than this. It's got to be a way to not feel this pain or this problem, How is it possible? And that led me into a whole exploration of, just all sorts of things, like discovering I had systemic candida and changing my diet. And, I think it doesn't have to be anything out there. It can be all about inside you as well. And how can I feel more peaceful? How can I feel happy? How can I not have this pain? There's always ways to explore and discover and make things better.
Absolutely. Karen, thank you so much for being a modern day alchemist, an adventure, an athlete, a speaker and an author. It's been so amazing to chat with you today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey tribe, so today is a very special day. It is the 4th of August 2020, which makes it the 5th year anniversary of the Tough Girl podcast, which is absolutely amazing. And I can't believe it's been 5 years. It only feels like yesterday when I started the podcast. But it's a little thank you. There are a number of bonus episodes coming out today so that you can listen to 4 episodes if you so wish. So we've spoken with Lungi Mashunu, who's an intrepid sailor, adventurist, explorer, speaker and climate change activist. There's also an episode with Zara Mahmood, who's known as the Hill Walking Hijabi on Instagram. She's a hiker who lives in Scotland. She got into hiking 3 years ago when a friend took her out for a walk to help reduce the stress of her chartered accountancy exams. Zara is encouraging other Muslim women to get into the outdoors and experience its physical and mental benefits. We also speak with Sarah Kumalo, who's a Zambian-born South African explorer and mountaineer. In May 2019, she became the first Black African woman to reach the summit of Mount Everest. I'm also doing a special solo episode as well, reflections on the past year. So I'll also be taking the time out to answer questions from the Tough Girl tribe and talk about some of the different challenges that I've done, from hiking the Camino, walking the Lycian Way and walking on the Overland Track, and just sharing more about Tough Girl challenges, the Tough Girl podcast, what's been going on, a bit more information behind the scenes, sort of like an accountability episode to share more about what it is, what is going on. Do you just want to say a massive thank you again to all of the incredible patrons who are supporting the Tough Girl podcast. I couldn't do it without you. It makes such an amazing difference. And if you have been listening to Tough Girl podcast now on a pretty regular basis over the past number of years, and you would like to donate and support, there's a couple of options for you. You can go to the website toughgirlchallenges.com, and if you scroll to the bottom, there is a PayPal donate button which you can hit on. I accept US dollars, euros, sterling, Australian dollars. So I work in all of those currencies. So you can just donate in whatever currency that you are in. Every donation makes a massive difference. If you would like to support on a more sort of regular basis, then you can sign up via Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. There's a number of options when you go in. You can sign up from $2 a month. You can sign up from $5 a month, $10 a month, $15 a month. That's that choice is completely up to you. You know, whatever it is that you can afford, whatever value that you derive from the podcast and how much you would like to pay it forward. You know, $2 a month, $5 a month would be incredible. You know, if I got a couple more hundred people at $2 or $5 a month, it would be incredible. But thank you everybody for all your amazing support, and wherever you are, whatever you are doing, keep being amazing, keep giving it your all, keep being inspired, keep living your dreams, keep going after the adventures that you want to do, keep living life on your terms and following your passions and your interests. I believe in you, and thank you for believing in me. I really do appreciate all of your support. Take care, lots of love, and I'll be back with you next Tuesday for another awesome episode of the Tough Girl Podcast.